The driveway appeared quite unexpectedly after a sharp bend in the winding lane, taking Melissa by surprise. There were no signposts to advertise its presence, and she almost missed the turning. Something made her slow down, though, and look to her right as they came around the corner. And there it was. Ashleigh, she whispered to herself as she stared at the house through a pair of wrought-iron gates. Confusion filled her mind when she realized she recognized this place, and yet she was sure she had never been here before. The old manor house nestled in a hollow, as if it had burrowed into the ground for comfort. Picture perfect, it was built of timber and orange-red bricks, with tiny leaded windows and tall chimney stacks. The colour gave an impression of warmth, reinforced by the sunlight reflected off the myriad of window panes. A shiver snaked up Melissa's spine. The view was eerily familiar. "Is this where the old lady lives?" Her 12-year-old daughter Jilly sighed and removed the earplugs of her iPod, then directed a look of suffering at her mother, which Melissa ignored. "Yes, I think so," she replied. But really there was no doubt about it. She knew this was the right place, and didn't need to check the written directions. The sensation of déjà vu was so strong it made her frown. Perplexed, she continued to stare through the gate. "Do we have to stay long?" It was Melissa's turn to sigh. "I told you we're invited for the whole weekend. Weren't you listening? I've never met Great-Aunt Dorothy before, so it would be nice if we could at least make a good first impression." "Come on, please stop sulking now. You'll survive. Who knows, you might even enjoy it." Jilly made a face and muttered, "Fat chance," then turned up her music once more, oblivious to the beautiful countryside surrounding them. Melissa shook her head and climbed out of the car to open the gates. She had to admit to some apprehension herself, as her great-aunt's invitation to come and stay for a weekend had been totally unexpected. Dorothy's phone call a few days earlier was the first communication anyone in the family had had with her for over 50 years. Apparently Dorothy had fallen out with her sister Ruth, Melissa's grandmother, and no one had heard from her since. So why the sudden change of heart? And how had Dorothy found her after all this time? A recent electoral roll, perhaps? Or had she hired a sleuth? The crisp air made Melissa pull the edges of her unbuttoned jacket together, but she soon forgot the cold as she breathed in the earthy smells of the countryside. It was like stepping into a greenhouse where you instinctively fill your lungs to capacity from the oxygen-rich air, and Melissa couldn't seem to get enough of it. Although nature was only just waking from its winter slumber, there was plenty of greenery around, which made a welcome change from London. Melissa stood for a moment, simply admiring the view. They continued up the drive and parked next to a yew hedge, which surrounded a part of the lawn and flower beds immediately in front of the house, creating a cottage garden within the main grounds. The hedge had been trimmed to velvety perfection and grew thick and deep. A profusion of snowdrops peeped out from underneath the bushes, looking as if they were wondering whether it was safe to come out yet. Before Melissa had even switched off the engine, a woman emerged from the front door and came down the path towards a gate set in the hedge. "Welcome, my dears," she called out. An excited little white terrier with a patch of black over one eye trotted behind her. When he caught sight of them, he started jumping up and down, barking furiously. Melissa assumed the woman must be her great-aunt, since no one else came out. They shook hands in a rather formal way, which made Melissa feel as though she ought to curtsy or something. Dorothy was all smiles, however, so she gathered it was just old-fashioned manners. "Hello, lovely to meet you," Melissa said. "And you, I'm so glad you could come." Dorothy turned to wag a finger at the terrier. "Now stop that, Russ, you're too noisy," she ordered, but he wouldn't settle down until he'd been made a fuss of by his guests. "I'm sorry, he has no manners. He's just so happy to have visitors. I think he's hoping your daughter will play with him later." "I'd love to. Can we go now?"